Kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. Lovely to be with you tonight. Huge apologies as we kick into a show because tonight is a pre-recorded show. Best of unforeseen circumstances have come up that have caused us to not be able to put on a live stream tonight. So whilst you guys can have fun in the chats, you might even see us in there as well saying g'day. Things have come up that enable it not to be live with us in studio at the time that you are watching this. So huge apologies, but we'll be back in the next allotted show. Monday is what I'm trying to say, from 9 p.m. for another live. Stay with us on Twitter over the next couple of days and over the weekend, where you'll see clips and highlights coming out from the previous 3 night shows. But as for tonight, I do apologise, but we aren't able to bring you a live streamed show. But we have got some pretty incredible interviews and conversations coming up for you. We are going to be talking tax tonight. We're going to be talking about the wealthiest New Zealanders not paying their fair amount of tax. We're going to be talking to Phillip Mills from Les Mills, Millionaires for Humanity. I think that's the group from memory, talking about wealthy people paying more tax. And we are going to be having a chat with Chris Cahill from the Police Association, talking about acts wanting to ban the gun registry and how maybe that's not the best idea in the world. So be lovely to one another in the chat. Enjoy your time here. Follow us on Twitter. Like and subscribe. Like if you're watching right now. And other than that, we'll catch up with you Monday night from 9 p.m. for another live edition of Big Hairy News. Hooroo. You want to welcome to the show the Police Association President. It's Chris Cahill. Chris, thanks for joining me today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks very much. Good to be here.
We've been talking about this. We talked about this last night. To do with the gun registry and the policy put out by ACT that you guys, according to stuff.co.nz, have listed as an attack on Kiwi safety. Can you expand on that a little bit for me?
Yeah, well, I think the key for us is that we believe a gun registry will mean there's a lot better understanding of who has firearms, where they are, and are they secure. And that will then lead to more responsible control of them. The biggest issue we have is currently, once you buy a firearm, you do not have to retain that and be responsible for retaining it. So you can immediately pass that on to anyone. Or if it's stolen, you don't have to report it stolen. And there's in fact no record of if you have 1, 100 or any firearms.
Right.
And really what that's caused is the few unscrupulous firearms owners are on selling them or supplying them to criminals. And that's where criminals in New Zealand mainly obtain their firearms from.
So for clarity, a couple of things. The first thing is I've never purchased a firearm, but I would assume, like if you go to Gun City or something like that, there's some kind of quote unquote registry, because you probably have to fill in all your details to say you've purchased the gun. So there's some kind of traceable in that first purchase, but you're saying then to on-sell it, it's the Wild West. You can do what you want. It can go where you want. You can sell it to whomever you want, which means, in theory, I guess, you could have a criminal element buy to order. They could get a law-abiding person with a license, etc., to buy it, and then they could just buy it off them. That's something that can happen now. That's the first part, just for clarity for me.
Yeah, very much so. So currently, if I go and purchase a firearm, the dealer will record that I purchased a firearm from them, but that won't be recorded anywhere else but in the dealer's records.
Yep.
So can you do what you just said? Very much so. So just recently we had the report from Napier of a guy called Kershaw Singh, who had 5 different, he wasn't a licensed firearms holder, he had 5 different licensed firearm owners purchase carbine-style rifles for him. Wow. He then cut them down and then on-sold them to gangs in Auckland, 21. And when you cut those down, they already have a pistol grip. So it looks exactly like a revolver handgun. So that's how easy it was. No record. He could do it, no problem at all.
And to just to continue on from that conversation about that path that I just put through about legally purchasing then on-selling, you're saying that the research shows is that the most common way a gang will get an illegal gun today is through someone buying it legally and then either on-selling it or having their legal gun stolen? Is that, like when we talk about when the bad guys get the guns, is that the most common way that they get it?
Yeah, so police were lax, shall we say, in following up how when they recovered guns from criminals, where had they originated from? And
Right.
after 2019 massacre in Christchurch, they set up a firearms investigation team based in the National Organised Crime Group. And before that, I'd been saying most of them were stolen. But in fact, what they identified, when they could trace where a firearm came from,
Yeah.
the vast majority with what we call straw purchasing. So purchased by a legitimate firearms owner and then on sold to a gang member or other criminal.
Okay. So how would the gun registry stop that, just to make sure everyone's fully informed as to why the police want it? And then we can get on to whatever ACT's doing. We'll do that in a sec, though.
All right. Okay. So what a gun register, when I purchase a gun,
Yep.
it would then go on to the firearms registry. So I would then say if I'd purchased 10 firearms, it would show Chris Cahill has purchased 10 firearms. Police would then be able to go and check and say, can you show us your 10 firearms you've purchased? And if I didn't have those 10 firearms, I would have to explain where they are. But currently, I could purchase those 10 firearms. It's not registered my name. I never have to explain where those 10 firearms have gone to. So in other words, I now will be held responsible for my firearms.
So it's a way to, I guess, stop those. And look, we talked about this last night, Chris. We don't need to get into the conversation around law-abiding citizens, because every law is written because a few people won't abide by them, not the vast majority. I don't need a law to say don't murder someone, right? I don't need that law for me, right? But there is a very, very slim percentage of people that we need a law for, so that there can be punitive punishment when that thing does happen. So that's every law. So we don't need to get into this conversation that ACT or whoever goes through, political parties go through, saying, but all those law-abiding, there's no law that's written for all the law-abiding people. It's always written for those who won't abide by the law. Sorry, you go.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, you 100% nail it. We register cars, we register dogs. Nearly all car owners, nearly all dog owners are law-abiding citizens. That's not why we register. We register for the ones that don't.
Yeah. But this is going to, for those law-abiding citizens who are already doing the right thing, this is going to be like another layer of security to keep their guns, keep them accountable for their guns, and also help deter, perhaps, from people then doing the straw polling because of that accountability. Straw polling, straw selling, whatever the correct term is.
Yeah, straw selling. Yeah, exactly. It means now there's a way for police to identify someone who may be straw selling or straw purchasing. And look, the other side too, in Australia, when they introduced registries across the country, across all the states, and that was in response to the Port Arthur massacre,
yep,
deaths dropped from 10,000 a year to 1,500. And the most obvious thing that was attributable for is firearms owners realised if a firearm was stolen, they would have to report that, because now police would be able to say, where's your firearms? So they increased their security. They, rather than leaving them back at the farm ute or in the farm shed, they locked them in the safes. So it increased security, which is much safer for firearm owners as well.
In the article from the weekend, you say that the policy of ACT, who are saying they're going to repeal this law, is a, quote, failure of responsibility, end quote, and an attack on the safety of law-abiding New Zealanders. Can you unpack that a little bit for me?
Yeah, well, the reality is, if you do away with the look, it's worth having a bit of history. After the Aotearoa massacre, now we had a commission of inquiry led by Justice Thorpe, and all this legislation and a gun registry was recommended there as a key way to control and increase the responsibility of firearms. The gun lobby just pushed back so long that, to be honest, people forgot about Aotearoa and the urgency didn't occur to happen. Now, after 2019, Labor government led by Jacinda Ardern at the time made it clear they weren't going to allow that to happen, and they pushed this through why people could remember why it would happen.
For sure.
So to now, 4 years down the track, we now have pushback saying we don't need this. Ignores the reason which we actually brought it in. What I mean, just today, there's reports of a young girl being shot in Auckland in a drive-by shooting, but a road rage shooting. You know, now that probably wasn't done by a licensed firearms owner, but where
Right.
did the gun come from? That's the point we're making. We've got to restrict that supply, and a gun registry is the best way to restrict the supply. It won't be the only way. Then we'll have to look at issues like, will this increase importations, illegal importations, which we don't have any evidence. Police don't have any evidence that that's significant at the moment. And then also, the 3D printing of firearms will be something in the future. But you don't give up the biggest gain just because there'll be other things to deal with in the future.
Well, and also, unfortunately, and this is perhaps my political commentator side coming out now, Chris, rather than the interview with you, is that you don't make laws based on a hypothetical potential that might happen in the future. Because if you say we're going to stop this law because this thing might happen in the future, you could do that for literally any law on the books. You could find a hypothetical thing in the future that may or may not happen to cancel a law. So it's just lunacy. Speaking of lunacy, the ACT Party. ACT MP Nicole McKee, who is actually, or certainly has worked before as a gun lobbyist, and we've got all the places she worked for and looked for the rights of gun owners. How does the association feel about her, in particular, coming out pushing back against this, especially with the background of her being, pro-gun lobby? Does it feel a little bit like a former tobaccoist coming out against, smoke-free places in New Zealand?
Yeah, well, it does. Look, I can say I've met Nicole on numerous occasions, and I like her as a person, and I actually respect what she's done in Parliament. I think she's been pretty effective, and you might argue that her role is to lobby for the people that she thinks voted her in. But I think they also have a responsibility to look beyond just what works for a small amount of New Zealand and works for everyone. And look, even when I talk to her, her argument, for instance, that a gun registry would create a shopping list for criminals,
For sure.
it doesn't really stack up when they support a gun registry for handguns and restricted weapons, which would be some of the most sought after weapons by criminals.
Yeah.
And also, police have gone a hell of a long way, and they've briefed her on how this gun registry will work and the security around it. And okay, we will always admit everything's under attack by hackers, etc. these days. But police have gone very put very good safety nets in around that and security around that. And to be honest, if I wanted to know who had firearms, I'd probably tap into the local gun club websites or into your arms dealers' websites and shops, which won't have near as high a security. That'll tell me who's got guns quicker than this gun registry.
But the point you're making is a really, really wise one, that if part of their argument is if we have a gun registry, that's a shopping list for gun, to spell it out. In other words, if someone got that information, they'd know where all the guns are. With ACT saying they still want, 2 lots of weapons, 2 classifications of weapons on a registry, it still does that. So it seems to me that when I think about it as an outsider looking in, that's the consummate example of politicking, that they're saying we don't want a gun registry because we don't want people to know where the guns are, but we'll have these guns on a gun registry so therefore people could find out where the guns are. That feels to me like the ultimate in politicking rather than good policy. You don't have to comment on that in your position, but that's how it feels to me.
Yeah, to me, it lacks common sense, really. It lacks common, and I think it's really important to emphasise nothing in a gun registry stops gun owners having guns and having as many guns as the law allows them to have.
Yeah.
That's not what we're trying to do. I mean, I speak to lots of firearms owners, and most of the ones I speak to don't have an issue with a firearms registry. Some of them get a bit confused about what it might mean. Yeah. And I'm fully supportive of the need for firearms in New Zealand, both in a recreational sense and in a pest control sense. I mean, I talk to deer hunters about that, how deer are out of control in New Zealand. We need these people out there shooting deer. Sure. And nothing I do is to stop them. But we have to have the balance between that and safety. And as you said right at the start, this isn't for law-abiding people. This is for the criminals that might have gun licenses. A small number. No law is.
That's one of the stupidest things all politicians try and pull out there. That this will affect law-abiding. Well, that's not for them. It's for the others. One other question though about the MP McKee. She used the word competent. That the police wouldn't be competent when it came to holding this information? In other words, that the administration of the system wasn't up to, you guys weren't up to the task of it. How do you feel by someone who could be in government within 5 or 6 months thinking that the police aren't competent to do this job?
Yeah, look, I was a bit insulted when she suggested we were putting incompetent officers into this work group.
Yeah.
Because that's, from what I've seen, we've actually got some amazing people working in there, and certainly some of the lead people I've dealt with are exceptional. But in fairness, the one thing also in fairness, a criticism the gun community has had for a long time is police have badly managed the administration of firearms. And that was identified in 2019 when there was a review. Police haven't put the resources in, they haven't put the expertise in the right areas. But since then, they have established this whole firearms safety team. It's got 400 or 500 staff it'll have in when it's finally complete. And the firearms community will rightly get a much better service and a much more professional service. So perhaps she was just trying to say you haven't done a good job in the past, and that's a fair criticism.
Right.
But I think going forward, I have every confidence actually they're going to get an exceptional service.
Hey, Chris, before you go, and you've already kind of referenced it once, the situation I think in the West Auckland or Auckland's Western Motorway today about a road rage incident where a car was following a minivan and whatever happened, tempers flared and the car behind shot at the car in front, injuring a teenage girl who's now in hospital in stable condition, we hear, which is great to hear. Is there anything else that you can tell us about this incident from the Police Association? Any information that's going out there that can inform our listeners as to what's happened with it, what's going on, what you guys know as of today?
Yeah, no, look, I can't really tell you a lot more than you know, except, I certainly know police have put a big team on this because they see, how dangerous it is. If you're willing to do something like that once, it could happen again. But without trying to scare people, I actually get so many reports from our members that don't make the news of firearm incidents. I would not be exaggerating to say, on average, I get a report a day of shots being fired or firearms presented across New Zealand, many in Auckland, but across New Zealand. It's much higher rate than people actually realise. I'm stunned how often houses are getting shot at in incidents, or people turning up at hospital having been shot in gang retributions or things. It's in fact the life of police officers now that they expect to deal with firearms whenever they go to work.
And just going full circle for my last question then, is do you think that the gun registry could actively change those stats? Like with the hopefully the slowing down of having firearm gun owners through to perhaps criminal elements, do you think that this is a literal tool? Do the police see this as a literal tool that could slow down some of those stats that you're talking about and impact it so we could have fewer interactions with guns in New Zealand in the future?
Yeah, very much so. That to me is the key. If it has got the ability to choke off the main supply of firearms to criminals, and that's why I support it so much. It's not an administration tool. It's to stop the flow of illegal firearms to criminals. And then, as I said right at the start, then we have to look at the other risks. Will that mean that they'll try and import them illegally more? Will they print them more? But, so then you have to, adapt to what criminals work. But at the moment, there's no need to print them, no need to illegally import them, because you just get someone to buy them for you.
Very good. Well, not very good. So that came across well. Very good meant thank you, very good for the conversation. Not very good. That was very scary what you just said. That wasn't very good. You know what I mean. Chris Cahill is the Police Association President. Thank you for your time today. We really appreciate you fleshing this out a bit more for us, Chris.
Thanks very much, Pat. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Big news in New Zealand today is it seems like the uber wealthy, 311, I think it was, of the richest families in New Zealand were studied by IRD and have come out to be paying about, in total, once you add everything up, 9% tax on their earnings. Let's have a look at the story.
Now, you might like to be sitting down to hear this.
I am.
New research has found the wealthiest handful of Kiwi families are each worth an average of $276 million.
And they're effectively only paying half the tax of everyday Kiwis. The Revenue Minister says it shows in black and white that the tax system is unfair, but as political reporter Amelia Wade explains, he has no plans to fix it yet.
Our wealth.
Oh,
We
Chewy,
all
there's our
mostly
delivery from
dream of
Jacinda.
it, but what is it?
If you've got hundreds or thousands left over at the end of the week, you're wealthy.
Having lots of disposable income.
I regard myself as wealthy in the sense that when I go to the supermarket, I don't have to worry about, being able to pay the bill when I get to the checkout.
Turns out the most minted among us have substantially more than a shopping trolley. Try a collective wealth of $85 billion.
This finding is truly groundbreaking.
Thanks to a law change, the tax department spent 2 years and $3.2 million investigating the financial affairs of the richest 311 families.
For the first time, we have hard data confirming fundamental unfairness in our tax system.
That unfairness is because most Kiwis are taxed on every dollar they earn, as well as paying GST. So middle-income New Zealand effectively pays 20.2% in tax. But these high-wealth families effectively pay just 9.4%. That's because they don't grow their wealth from income. Most of it is from other largely untaxable things like trusts, property and investments.
When I say most, I mean 93%.
I don't think that's okay. It's disgusting.
Looking at their properties alone, the wealthy families own almost 7,000.
The top 1% of households hold more than a quarter of all of the financial assets in New Zealand.
Let me just spell that out again. They said 311 families. 311 families own 7,000 properties. I haven't even done this yet, and I probably could do it in my head if I was a bit better. What is that? So we'll go 7,000, divided by 300. Yeah, so that's about 22 properties each of the families owns. So good, bad, or indifferent, you can decide on that, but that's what the number is. And obviously some of them will own 5 properties and other ones will own 40, but it's a lot of properties amongst 300 families.
And the rich are really getting richer. In 2017, the families were worth $1 billion. In 2021, that was $14.6 billion. The opposition accusing Labour of planting a seed with the public about tax changes.
The top 2% of New Zealanders are paying about 26% of all our income tax, and I think that is entirely fair.
The government will use...
National's in a quandary here, because what you're finding, and we're going to play some clip from Mr. Luxon shortly, is National are basically now saying these top families have earned too much money, yet National is the party of the wealthy and uber wealthy, telling their supporters that they shouldn't be becoming wealthy or uber wealthy. And if you were a National Party and you came out and you said, well, the wealth of individuals has gone up by X amount of percent during our term, you'd probably celebrate that. But the wealth of the Labour during this Labour incumbent government, they've gone up by such a large amount, and National's trying to sell it as a bad thing. Now, it is a bad thing, but it's also National's bread and butter. So I think they're in a bit of a quandary here as to what to do. So what National is saying is Labour is better for the uber rich. Is that what they're saying? Because that's the outcome.
And I think that is entirely fair.
The government will use this report as part of a witch hunt, but witch hunts won't make us wealthier.
The government's research has outlined that they can do things differently, and this is their call to action.
The tax system is unfair. Do you have the courage to fix it?
This annoys me.
Yes.
Just not today.
But we have made it
me.
clear that we're not making significant tax changes today.
What annoys me is the big long pause.
Oh, and the grin.
Yeah, that annoyed me.
Didn't like the grin.
No, this has got about 60 seconds. Let's just play the end of it.
And probably not tomorrow either.
Well, Amelia joins.
Oh, that'll do. We don't need the commentary afterwards. Now, I'll show you what Luxon did. Now, this is a clip from what the Luxon was talking in that conversation. Except I sometimes think this is one of the things I like about hanging out with you guys and having as much time as we want, yeah? Because some of the more interesting things from his media scrum aren't shown in a 2-minute clip, right? Now, I'll read out to you what happens. You're not going to hear it very well because reporters, for some reason, don't put the mic to their own mouth. They only hold it out to him, so you can't hear him. 4 times in a row, Christopher Luxon is asked if he thinks that the tax system is fair. 4 times in a row by 2 different reporters. This isn't verbatim, but it's the basic question. The first question is, do you agree that the tax system is unfair? The second question is that tax system itself unfair? The third question is, the wealthiest 300 families pay 9% tax. Do you think that's fair? And the fourth question is, in terms that the wealthy pay half what the ordinary Kiwi pays, is that fair? Now, even if you don't hear the questions, you'll hear Luxon pausing. All 4 of these questions, he's asking, do you think the tax system is fair? At no point does he answer the question.
What I agree is that this government's been incredibly unfair on working New Zealanders because they've actually mismanaged the economy, created inflation, and caused huge amounts of pain and suffering.
Didn't create inflation.
And what
is it unfair?
What I'd say to you is, what is unfair is that this government has actually had policies that have inflated asset values where the wealthy have done incredibly well. If I compare and contrast the national period in government versus the Labor period in government,
do you think that the wealthiest 300 families
the printing of money,
paying 9%
the
is fair?
spending of
That's
money,
the next question.
This is a government that is proportionally the second biggest spending government in the OECD. It's proportionally the 4th biggest printer of money in the OECD. And it restricted our economy and shut down our immigration centres like nothing else, spiked domestic inflation and created a huge asset class.
Talking points.
So the wealthiest 311 families in the country pay about 9% tax versus median New Zealanders who pay about 20% tax.
Yeah.
To you, is that fair?
The top 2% of New Zealanders are paying about 26% of all our income tax, and I think that is entirely fair. We need to be in a place where this economy at the moment
we'll come back to
crying out for investment and capital to grow the economy. But what's happening here? To be under no illusion, it's not the wealthy that are the problem here. The problem here is the government that had economic policies that led to a massive inflation in asset classes that are nominal. They haven't always.
And he avoids the question so much that another reporter comes on and says, like the last reporter was asking you, do you think it's fair? And he still doesn't answer it.
That's very different from how our national government ran things. When you have good economic management, you don't create a condition where that happens.
You keep blaming the government, but it was the. On the economic management points, but back to Amelia's question.
Back to Amelia's question.
About the system, the tax system. So in terms of that disparity between the wealthiest paying half of what the ordinary Kiwi pays, is that fair?
What I'm just saying to you is the fairness. No, it's really grossly unfair that we've got a government that has mismanaged the economy so badly.
God's sake, man!
Anyway, we'll fade it out. So you get the idea. Now, I want to put something to bed, right? I nearly made the worst joke in the world. And the idea that the top 2% pay 20%, 26% of the tax. Let's make this really clear, right? I've said this before on the show and I'll say it again. If I make $1 million a year and Chewy makes $100,000 a year, good money, great. And let's not even say that. If Chewy makes $40,000 a year and I make $1 million a year and I pay 20% of my tax, so I'm left with $800,000, and Chewy pays 10% of his tax and he's left with $36,000. Who is impacted more? Chewy is impacted more because he has less. I'm hardly impacted at all, but I've paid far more. So just because they pay more in the hat doesn't mean they're paying their fair share, because those who have less and perhaps put less in the pot but proportionally pay more are impacted worse. 20% out of a pension is $28,000 impacts them a lot more than 40% out of a millionaire's salary. So when you hear people like Luxon say the top 2% pay 26% of the tax, it's a bait and switch to say they put more in the pot, but they put less proportionally compared to what they earn in the pot, even though it's more financially, if that makes sense. Really important to remember.
I've got a solution.
Nationalise it?
I love solving problems. No, that's my solution.
What, let them eat cake?
Guillotine time. No, it's enormously frustrating to see Luxon completely dodge the question. 3, well, 2. B, did I say A or 1? I don't know. I'm so fizzing at the moment. Is just throwing out bullshit left and right like they're smoke grenades to try and duck being pinned down on this issue. And then just apparently demonstrating a complete lack of understanding about how inflation works and what got this country into the position with these dragons sitting on accumulated piles of gold going, no, daddy, don't tax me. And I'll tell you, every government since the late 80s has put a brick in this wall. When they redid the tax in the late 80s, they dropped the top tax rate from 66% to 33%. They got rid of a land tax. And at that point, everyone went, well, we don't have a capital gains tax. We don't have a land tax. Then buying property is tax-free. So that's what I'm going to do with my money. So if you wanted to grow your money, you start gobbling up houses about the same time that a national government is selling off state-owned assets and state-owned houses. You start hoarding up properties that the country built for you. And then you make your money by buying and selling houses amongst yourselves and producing nothing. Like people in New Zealand, the rich, most of them don't invest in productive assets like businesses or that sort of thing. They'll invest in property because it's safe and there are no tax considerations. Go hard. Hoard up 7,000 properties over a decade of a housing shortage. What absolute ghouls. And the fact that Luxon cannot see that or will not admit it is infuriating because it means that he has no way of solving this.
Yeah, it's fair. What you're saying is fair. I'm just reminded as well, and I'm having a look for something while I'm talking to you, so I might be a little bit distracted here. I'm reminded of speaking to Don Brash about becoming the Prime Minister, and I remember talking to Don Brash. I'm going to see if I can find it. I'm just looking at my SoundCloud to see if it's up there. No, that's not that one.
Oh, just while you're looking.
Yeah. I can't see the screen, by the way, so if you want to do something.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
What have you done? Well, do I have to come over and check
nothing.
on you?
No, you just carry on with your life. That's fine.
Oh, I do have it here. This is an old, I wonder if I can do this. I wonder if I can find it. This is probably
now, for I do it for you in the chat, Labour are no different. That's pretty much exactly what I said. Is that both major parties have built this up over the last 40 years. They've all had recommendations. They've all had people look at the tax code and where people are funneling their money. You can't say that either one of them didn't know. National didn't want to do it because they'd hurt their friends or their own portfolios. Labour didn't want to do it because they didn't have the bollocks to do it when they had the ability.
Which is why when David Parker laughs, I'm like, fucking hell.
That's why I got angry.
The answer is yes, we're going to fix this, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But here's what I was trying to find. I found it, but I have to log in to get access to my own audio, so I'm not going to do that. I spoke to Don Brash, whatever it was, 2008, and I said to him, and the thing that reminds me of this is Mr. Luxon has said this in the last month. Don Brash said the same thing. It's a job interview, and I'll find out at the end of the year if I get hired for the job. And I played Don Brash the audio of him talking to Duncan Garner about sending troops into probably Afghanistan. And Duncan Garner asked 4 times, but Mr. Brash, would you have sent troops into? And the response was, this is a diversionary tactic. And so I sat in front of Don Brash and I said to him, you've said that this is a job interview. And he said, yes. I said, explain to me how in a job interview you can choose not to answer questions. If I go to a job interview working for JB Hi-Fi and they say, how good are you on the till? This is a diversionary question. It's not relevant to the job I've got at hand. It's like in a job, and if we ever get Mr. Lux, which I don't think we will, but if we do, I will use this clip and I will say to him exactly the same question. How can you expect to get a job when you're not answering questions in the interview process? You've chosen not to answer questions. You yourself have said this is a job interview. You've used that term. You're getting asked questions and you're not answering them. How can you expect to get a job when you don't answer the questions that are coming to you for that job? Now, what can we do? Chewy wants to have a guillotine. We've had this before. Look at that beautiful look at that little fella. Look at that little fella just there. Beautiful little fella hanging out with us. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but we did this last year in quite depth. You can go find it for yourself. When tax breaks for everyone leads to some paying more tax, tax-free thresholds explained. This is a very basic example based on the Australian system, that if we made it tax-free for under $14,000, this is the current tax system in New Zealand up the top here, 14,034, so it goes 14,000, the next band is 34, the next band is 22, the next band is 110. This is the bands up here. And if you made the tax-free on the first $14,000, and you increase the rate on the following bands, which is what Australia has done, and these bands are based on the Australian model, people who are, this is about the pension, 28,000, they'd be like $1,400 a year better off, $30 a week. You know, people on $50,000 would be about the same. They're around $1,000 better off. People on 100,000 would be paying a bit more, and the tipping point for that kind of system is for the system that I propose is $80,000. So in the current tax system, if you're paying, and that doesn't include working for families, that doesn't include family tax credit, it's purely PAYE. The current tax system, if you're doing $80,000, doesn't include student loans, you pay $17,320. On the proposed new system, my proposed system, on $80,000 you'll be earning $17,310. That means everyone under $80,000 would have more in their pocket. The squeezed middle, Mr. Luxon, for the cost of living crisis, and everyone above it would start paying a little bit more by a little bit more by a little bit more. As you can see here, if you were earning $300,000 under the current system, just PAYE, $97,000, under the new system, $108,000. That would be the system that I would suggest. We've done it before, and that would be a way that you could do it.
Before? The country Australia? That we're always compared to, Australia. Yeah.
That everyone's now going to move to
where things are better and people earn more money,
except
and that sort of thing. So why do we look to the Australians for fucking stupid ideas and we don't get this one? Like, so it's infuriating.
That's
right?
an idea.
Whenever these guys talk about tax, it's like they forget that we have a progressive tax system for a start. They love to trail that out there, that if you're in a different tax bracket, people absolutely don't understand what that means. You know, it's the illiteracy. It's the what did I say? The intellectual dishonesty that makes me really, really angry. And this is something that could make quite a big difference into a lot of people's lives, and make the tax system more progressive, and get the money that we need to get to keep things like the luxuries in this country, like hospitals and schools and such. You know, when everybody looks to the good old days, they never look at the tax rate, right?
Yeah, that's true. They just look at separate water drinking fountains. That's the great times, wasn't it? Separate drinking fountains.
Like in the States, they're always going, oh, look, remember when America was great and we had a massive navy and we could fight 2 wars at once. We went to the moon at the same time. And you go, well, what was your tax rate at that point?
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, you were taxing millionaires at 80%. That's why you were able to do it.
So this is what's probably, I reckon, is going to happen. There will be a pretty massive announcement from Labor. I don't know what. I wouldn't be surprised if there was capital gains tax. And capital gains tax is not going to be a winner for Labor, because there are a lot of Labor voters who won't be that interested in it. But could be. But the I keep saying interest-free, the tax-free band could be announced, and what they'd be saying is, and it will be introduced budget 2024. In other words, if you want it, you better put us back in. He is, I believe, the founder. Yes, a founder and executive director at Les Mills International. It's Phillip Mills. Phillip, thank you for coming and joining us.
Hi there. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Thanks for jumping in. Now, look, we've just kind of talked this all through a bit with Ian about what's going on. Really interested to know why you have signed this letter. What's the reason that you have chosen to say we need to pay more tax?
Oh, look, I think that we've been too obsessed with paying less tax for too long. And I think that we're seeing the results of that. We need to build a world-class education system. If we want to have a great economy and be a great place to live, with people realizing their ability and people having a wonderful future, then we have to be investing in things like a world-class educational system. We can't have kids coming to school with empty stomachs and unable to learn. If some of us are worse off, we're all worse off. There's lots of reasons there. We need to go back the other way, and there are a lot of great economies. Most of our business now is in Europe, and you look at some of the economies there, the Scandinavian economies, Germany, Holland, for instance, where they pay a hell of a lot more tax than we do, and they've got better economies, and they've got, they've got world-class systems in education, health, welfare, those sorts of areas, and they're doing a really good job of, to Ian's point just a minute ago, of dealing with climate change, and the moving into the low carbon economy, which is so crucial this century.
How do you feel, Phillip, about, like, for example, we've been warmed up by the current government to say there's going to be no kind of extra excise tax on the cyclone recovery, that sort of thing. It seems that they're not going to introduce a tax to help pay for that. What is it? Is this the third event that's happened in the top half of the North Island? That's
Fourth.
Linked or due fourth, okay, due to climate change. What do you think about that? Do you think there's other ways around finding the funds for that, or is that for you just a black and white? A tax would be the way to pay for the recovery from these cyclones, and also then help maybe move forward about what to do next with climate change issues?
We have to find a way of funding the recovery, and I'm not sure how they're going to do it, but we do have to get ahead of this. McKinsey has said recently that we need to be spending $2 on adaptation right now for every dollar that we spend on mitigation. Things are going to get worse before they get better. We know that is going to happen. It's inevitable. It's already locked in. We will hopefully go through the energy transition by mid-century, and that will deal with 75-80% of the problem. And then if we don't have any major irreversible events by the end of the century, we will gradually move back towards 20th century climate levels of climate stability. But for a long time, things are going to get worse, and we have to do things that build resilience, that build adaptation, and that's. There are very clear things we can do, but it will take a lot of money. I don't want to paint a picture of sort of doom and gloom. I think there are some wonderful things happening in climate change. The US is, with the Inflation Reduction Act, $376 billion, and a couple of other acts that they've put through. There's about $500 billion worth of stimulus that they've put in here, and that's supposedly going to stimulate about $2 trillion of spending. Europe, after initially having protested that was, in breach of free trade agreements and being told to piss off by the Americans, has then come in with their $376 billion to match. So, there's trillions of dollars there. China is spending heaps on it. So there are a lot of good things happening to move us, predominantly to fossil-free energy and move through the energy transition, which is the crucial part. But we do have to spend on this stuff, and a lot of good things that we can spend, things that we must spend money on to create resilience to these events. Some of them are natural systems. Big part of it is natural systems, and planting a lot of indigenous rainforest, reforesting the country, planting rainforest, regenerating, enriching, planting millions of hectares of rainforest will create drought resilience, flood resistance, localized cooling, stabilize rainfall, protect us, biodiversity, which is crucial. Avoid species extinction, protect a lot of our natural streams around food production, things like that. So many things that we can do with nature-based systems and regenerative farming techniques and all of those things. Our farmers and our foresters really can become heroes. Unfortunately, radiata pine is not a part of that story. that is a separate story which is about trade, but it contributes nothing. The recent studies have said there's a zero contribution. Our whole ETS is based on radiator pine, which it turns out actually has pretty much a net zero contribution to that. It's not part of the natural systems. But at the other end of it, we do have to create the physical stuff to protect us from flooding, and you've had cities like Amsterdam, which have been underwater for hundreds of years, and so there's some building we've got to do, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff around natural systems and sort of marine stuff and forestry stuff and farming stuff.
Hey, Phillip, I would imagine that you are running circles of people with access to wealth, right? I mean, if you're working in the sort of business world, and I'm interested to get your take on maybe more of a observation or a character question. Why does it seem, and if I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong, but why does it seem, in your opinion, that many high net individuals are doing the opposite, or are voicing the opposite of what you guys are voicing, which is we want to pay more, whereas so often we hear the narrative in the media, and if it's wrong, say it from your experience, that we pay our fair share, we pay enough, sort of thing. Why do you think that is? It appears that wanting to pay less tax comes with a high net individual. It seems to be contrary to what you guys are saying. Am I wrong in that observation, or is that a fair observation, and why would that be, do you think?
A couple of things. First of all, I'm not sure if you're right or wrong.
Okay.
I don't know, what the data is on what people believe, and it doesn't take many people to skew that. Yes, you may have some loud voices on the other side, but what the bulk of there are an awful lot of people who I deal with. There were 100 who signed this petition, and I've had so many people contact me and say, we didn't know about it. We would sign it. We'd love to sign it. And we've had with Pure Advantage, we've had hundreds of people sign petitions. Hundreds of business leaders around the country sign petitions around climate change. Around all the various aspects of that. So there's a whole bunch of business people who are well aware that if we don't deal with climate change, it's not going to be very good for business, aside from anything else. And if we want to have a successful economy in the future, we have to deal with climate change. Now, I'm not sure that there is, so the second part of my answer to that is, I'm not sure that there is the awareness I would make up of the problems with having a great big wealth gap, and the problems of, I don't think there are many business people who wouldn't agree if you ask them that we want a world-class education system.
Sure.
That is crucial to the future of having a good economy, and everybody is going to say that. I also don't think that there are many business people who, if you ask them, are going to say that they're happy about a situation, about a country that has child poverty, and we hadn't had child poverty since about 1950 through until this three-term national government, and the move towards reducing taxes, and this whole sort of a monetarist focus that captured the imagination of, everybody, lots of people, including me, were captured by that in the 80s. It seemed like a good idea, but really, when you read economics properly, it's the free market is not going to solve things. You go back to the tragedy of the commons, and you do have to have regulation. You have to have a mix of competition and of regulation if you want to get an ideal economic result. Otherwise, you are going to have people who take advantage of the thing and who destroy public assets. There are some people who have to be regulated, but that's we're starting to wonder a bit. But does that answer your question? Is that
yeah, no, I'm hearing you.
So with this letter now, I guess, out in the wild, and as you say, more people sort of going, well, I want to put my name on this. How do we keep this conversation going in the space when you've got people like Nicola Willis saying that it's just the politics of envy? Any discussion about increasing a wealth tax or adding a new tax to target high wealth hate the word target high wealth individuals is just the politics of envy. If we're going to get really emotive like that.
Has she said that in response to this letter? Because this is clearly people who are envious, who have signed this. I think that this needs to become a bipartisan issue. I think this is something like trade and defense and climate change that we just have to stop using as a political football. This is bad for all of us. And I think, let's grow up, people. Let's sit down and say these are things that they are must-haves for our society. And we've just all got to agree that, that we're going to have a fair taxation system. We're going to stop advantaging unproductive asset classes like housing speculation. The National Party knows that this is not good. Even the ACT Party knows that this is not good stuff to do, and we got to stop using it as a political football. It's not good for any of us. Doesn't matter who's in power.
So here's the hurdle, and I heard it today with Sir Ian. He was talking to Kerry Woodham on News Talk ZB, and she's my example of this for tonight because I heard it from her. But I imagine this is common from people who have means, and I'm not even talking about that 314 families, but people who are doing okay, right? The often refrain from them is, I'm happy to pay my tax, but I can't stand the government waste. And so how do we get past that? Because that could also just be used as an excuse forever to not pay as much tax. You could always be using that, even because what I hear often is waste from a government means that's not how I want my government to spend my money. But if the opposing side wins and they're the team I support, I'm okay with how they spend it. So, waste is relative. What one person thinks is waste, someone else doesn't. How do we get past that idea of, people who are, I'm not even talking about wealthy, but doing all right, to stop that adage of, but they're so wasteful, I don't want to give them another cent?
I'm not sure that the numbers show this to be the case. If you look at what the government money is spent on, the big areas that it's spent on, was it Ian that was just saying that, social welfare is the biggest one of them?
He said social welfare and then health and education, I believe, were the three. One, two, three.
Yes. So I'm not sure that you can say that those things are wastefully spent. There will be measures of efficiency in different governments around the world, and there will be ways of doing this better and worse. And we've got to have a focus on doing it better. If we're going to build a world-class education system, there will be ways in which you set about doing that. Copying the best practices around the world, learning from who is doing this best of all. And yes, you want to do things efficiently, but I'm not sure that there is a lot of waste, and that's something that you deal with separately. You have some measures of efficiency and productivity of government departments. My experience has been mixed. That you have some very, very good civil servants. My experience has been that things are not always done better by privatizing them. We had a big wave of privatizations in the late 80s, and a lot of those things were being much worse. Were done much worse when they were privatized. Our national rail system, for instance, was destroyed by being privatized. So you get efficiency and inefficiency in both public and private businesses. And I'm not an expert in the data on this.
Hey, it's been really good talking to you,
but
Phillip.
I agree with you that I think it has been used as an excuse not to do anything, and that's not the right thing. We know that we have to deal with these issues if we want to have a successful economy and a bright future, and we have to move to deal with them. And separately from that, you focus on efficiency. You don't use it as an excuse not to do anything. That's just stupid.